welcome back to another episode of Neon Swell. For those of you who don't know, this is a US 22-foot sailboat that I purchased off of Craigslist in absolutely terrible condition. I've spent the last year working on this boat in my spare time with the intention of sailing it around Florida and into the Bahamas. Now, I've gutted it and rejuvenated it piece by piece in order to make it seaworthy enough to cross the Gulf Stream. Now, in last episode, I created the galley shelf you see here, as well as the galley tabletop. I then moved on to the 2 vertical bed support templates and finished everything off by adding 2 layers of 1708 to the entire hull of the boat. Now, in this episode, I finished adding the 2 vertical bed support templates and then take a look at the top core of the boat. I finished adding the core in episode 12, and that was for the center part of the boat. In episode 6 and 7, Ryan and I had finished adding the core to the front bow of the boat. We ended up fiberglassing several layers of 1708 in the front bow, and the process was way easier than it was this time. This time around, in episode 14, I take a look at fiberglassing the top core of the boat by myself. There's a ton of issues that happen, and a whole bunch of problems that occur during the process. Ryan, if you're watching, I could have really used your help in this episode. Alright, so as you can tell from that last clip, my GoPro microphone holes are currently covered in epoxy, so I'll be doing a little bit of a voiceover on this segment. You can see here the galley shelf ended up inserting and drying rock hard into its position under the 2-burner Rigo holder right there to the right. Now, moving on from the galley shelf, I head over to the vertical bed support template that I inserted in the previous clips you saw at the beginning of this episode. I go on here and do a little bit of a stress test on the joints that I had made just to check and make sure that everything was up to par and gonna be hard enough for this boat to see at least 50-foot seas. I then go on to talk a little bit about this area of the boat and my plans for a companionway step down over the top of the head that will be going into the center location there. Now, I also go ahead and provision for the next vertical bed support that's going to go in this area, and you'll see that in the upcoming clips right about now. So again, I have some audio recorded on the GoPro, but it really came out quite terrible, so I'll do a quick voiceover again. I continue on with my yammering about what I'm going to do with the cloth laying behind me on the deck and where I want to put it on the top roof of the boat. And basically, I'm prepping the night before to take that 1708 you see there and cut it into smaller pieces and place it on top of the core that I had inserted in episode 12 that I had talked about in the beginning of this episode. Now, little did I know what I was getting into when I was doing this, and I was just kind of here in the video going through how I want to lay the pieces and the different methodologies that I wanted to use for skinnier pieces on the seams and laying bigger pieces and then sandwiching in it with a whole bunch of smaller pieces and then laying another big piece over top of that, and you know, laying the 1708 over the mast as well and trying to interlock everything and just make everything much stronger than it should be. Little did I know that it wasn't going to work in the end, so you'll see here in the future clips how well it actually turns out. But I do finish the process, and as you can see here, I'm cutting out multiple layers of actually 3 of the big sheets that I plan on laying on top of the core there. So if you look above me, this is where I'm going to be placing the 1708 tomorrow. You can see I have these slivers here, 1 and 2, that need to be covered and as well as all this Divinycell core right here. So this all needs to be covered. And I have to do this in a fashion that will allow for the optimum, I guess, weight distribution and strength of the top. Not to mention doing each sliver and then laying each these 36 by 43 inch pieces. I also have to do it up by the mast over here. Now, this is going to be a little tricky because I got to get it through the bulkhead, so I've cut a whole bunch of pieces here. You'll see that these are wide enough to fit up into the mast here, and then I'll take the pieces that I have cut over here to pretty much thread in between the bulkhead, and then what I plan on doing is kind of just doing like a step up here with the 1708. And the 1708 really conforms to angles pretty well, so what I'll end up doing is having thickened epoxy and then just placing that 1708 above the thickened epoxy like I've done with the rest of the boat, and I think that'll work. I'm going to have to fit it in these little crevices here and over here, but I think it's going to work out. It's just going to be a lot of work, and it's probably supposed to be anyway, so it's really going to be hot in here. I'm going to try to wake up early and start this at 8 o'clock in the morning. I had prepped everything, so it should just be coming here and epoxy and fiberglass, so we'll check that out tomorrow, and I'm sure you'll see the clip right after this. So it still makes me laugh watching this footage. As you can see here, I'm laying up a layer of 1708 over the mast support area of the boat. I go ahead and take some epoxy and cover and make sure I've got all the bubbles out of this area and this piece of fiberglass, and then I go ahead and fiberglass the rest of the core of the boat. Now that was one of the easiest sections of the boat that I had to do. As you can see in the future clips, the process becomes a lot more difficult as the pieces of fiberglass start falling on my head. Now from the next few sets of clips here, you'll see my courageous attempt to place that entire piece of fiberglass you saw there across the core of the boat here. Now the measurements for this piece is exactly the size of that core, and I really thought I was going to be able to get this up by myself, but as you can tell, I start doing the butterfly dance here and really fail several times to get this piece up into its spot on the boat. So after more than a few tries of attempting to place that large piece on the core of the boat, I eventually give up and cut it directly in half and place that piece up there. And I'll give a little disclaimer, in the future clips I end up not getting a piece that large up again. I then go ahead and make a quick pit stop with a little bit of acetone to wipe off the built up epoxy on my mast so I can continue on with the layup of fiberglass. The amount of epoxy that I'm bathing in by the end of this whole video set is quite ridiculous, and I was picking it off in my hair and my skin for the next few days. You can see the difficulty I had even with the smaller pieces of 1708, just trying to get them to stick to the core and the previous laid up fiberglass. Now, I don't know what was causing this to happen, whether it was the humidity or not enough epoxy or the different brand of epoxy that I used for this layup, but it really made it really hard for me to get a large piece up, and I'm hoping that the structural integrity is not suffering because of that. But I do lay enough of these little pieces up there that I think a good chemical bond will occur between the pieces, allowing a really rigid surface. But I was extremely confused about the whole scenario, but ended up getting it done regardless. So after watching the footage, I eventually ended up giving up on those larger pieces of 1708 and put enough of these smaller pieces to be reassured that when it dried, it would be more than strong enough for what this boat is really going to see. I finished up putting 3 layers of 1708 on the top deck here this morning. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning to beat the heat. It's currently about 90 degrees out here, maybe even 95 with the humidity of 80% or something like that. I had the Tyvek suit and all the gloves on and a full face mask, and I had tons of epoxy dripping all over me. I ripped my suit about 3 to 4 times. My whole body's covered in epoxy. I just got out of the shower. So yeah, it was a lot of work this morning, and I thought I was going to be able to do it in bigger pieces, but I guess because of the humidity, all the pieces that I kept trying to put up were sliding off and falling off, so I really had to start cutting everything in 1/8 and 1/4 sizes and just put it up by piece by piece. But it looks pretty good. There's a few bubbles. I'm going to go over them right now. I recorded with the GoPro, but I'm not sure if the file is corrupt or not because I got an error when I went to go shut it down. But yeah, everything's looking alright. I think it's going to dry pretty hard. And yeah, I ended up doing over there as well. You can see that where the mast is. Put 4 layers of 1708 all around this area. So yeah, that's the whole deck is done, and that was one of the biggest pieces that I had left. And I think once I sand it and once everything hardens, it's going to be really strong. So boat's looking good. I'm not really sure what I have to do next. Yeah, I haven't planned it out yet. I was just kind of trying to get this done before I thought about anything else. So it looks good, and hopefully the time lapse came out. If it did, I'm sure you guys saw it by now. So another piece done. So that's it for episode 14. I thank you all for watching. And stay tuned for upcoming episodes where I finish off some of the galley area and create a molded sink out of bare fiberglass, as well as create a folding tabletop that will be used in the galley area. So I thank you all again for watching, and be sure and hit that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video.